Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the gleaming atrium of the Galactic Science Academy, trying not to laugh at the excessive safety protocols surrounding her arrival. 3 separate decontamination chambers, 2 biological scans, and enough paperwork to fill an Earth library, all because she was classified as a high-risk biological entity. The Academy's pristine white hall stretched before her, staffed by various alien species wearing what looked like hazmat suits. Their protective gear ranged from sleek, transparent bubbles to bulky environmental suits with multiple atmospheric filters. Sarah, meanwhile, wore her standard diplomatic uniform, a simple blue blazer and matching pants. "Ambassador Chen, please remain stationary while we complete the final safety briefing," chirped Dr. Zilks, a floating cephalopod-like creature whose tentacles nervously twisted inside their containment suit. The alien's large eyes blinked rapidly as they consulted a holographic checklist. "You've already scanned me 3 times, Sarah said, struggling to keep the amusement out of her voice. "I promise I'm not carrying any deadly Earth pathogens." Dr. Zilks's chromatophores flashed anxiously. "With respect, Ambassador, your species originates from a Class 12 Deathworld. Standard protocols require a 4th scan." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Before Dr. Zilks could respond, another alien hurried over, this one resembling a tall, willowy plant encased in a crystalline shell. "The director will see you now," they announced, maintaining what Sarah assumed was a safe distance of exactly 3 meters. The group proceeded through several more security checkpoints before reaching the director's laboratory. The space was impressive. A vast chamber filled with bubbling tanks of mysterious liquids, hovering holographic displays, and equipment that defied Earth physics. Director Venra, a being composed of what appeared to be shifting geometric patterns within a containment field, greeted them from behind a safety barrier. "Ambassador Chen, welcome to the Academy. We are honored to host Earth's first diplomatic representative." Sarah noticed several screens displaying her vital signs, threat assessment ratings, and what appeared to be a countdown timer labeled "Maximum Safe Exposure Duration." "The honor is mine," she replied diplomatically. "Earth is eager to join the galactic scientific community." "Yes, quite." The director's patterns shifted nervously. "Though your planet's unique conditions present certain challenges. Perhaps we should begin with a traditional welcome ceremony." An assistant glided forward bearing what looked like a ceremonial chalice, filled with a gently glowing purple liquid. The assistant placed it on a sterile platform, which then extended toward Sarah. "Our traditional greeting involves sharing our most prized scientific achievement," Director Venra explained. "This compound represents centuries of research into perfect biological harmony." Sarah reached for the chalice, noticing how every alien in the room tensed. The liquid smelled pleasant, like lavender and ozone. "Of course, for your safety, we've prepared a heavily diluted," the director began, but Sarah had already taken a sip. The reaction was instant. Alarms blared. Containment fields snapped into place. Aliens scrambled in panic. Dr. Zilks's tentacles tied themselves in knots. "Emergency protosios inggt," announced the facility's eye. "Critical expos your event in progress." Sarah looked around in confusion, still holding the chalice. "Is something wrong?" Director Venra's patterns had frozen in a state of shock. "Wrong. Ambassador, you just consumed enough harmonious synthesis to kill a stellar whale. How are you still standing?" Sarah glanced at the purple liquid. "Oh, well, it's quite refreshing actually. Tastes a bit like those energy drinks we have back home." The entire laboratory descended into chaos. Sensors were going haywire. Scientists were shouting theories at each other, and someone appeared to be calling for an emergency evacuation of the entire sector. Sarah sighed and took another sip. It was going to be a long day. Impossible. Simply impossible. Dr. Zilks's tentacles whirled in agitation as they studied the readings for the 100th time. 6 hours had passed since Ambassador Chen's incident, and the entire academy was in an uproar. Sarah sat calmly on an examination table, surrounded by increasingly sophisticated scanning equipment. She'd been poked, prodded, and analyzed by more alien devices than she could count. The room around her looked like a cross between a medical bay and a particle accelerator, with worried scientists scurrying about in their protective gear. "Would anyone like to explain what's so impossible?" she asked, stifling a yawn. "Besides the fact that you won't let me get lunch." Director Venra's geometric patterns swirled in what Sarah had learned to interpret as deep distress. "Ambassador, the harmonious synthesis you consumed is not merely toxic, it is a fundamental restructuring agent. It was designed to realign biological systems into their most perfect form. And that's bad." Sarah reached for her water bottle, causing 3 scientists to flinch. "It's fatal." Dr. Zilks projected a holographic display showing cellular destruction. Any living organism exposed to the compound should have their molecular bonds completely reorganized. Yet your cells. The image shifted to show Sarah's cellular structure, completely unchanged except for what looked like a slight reinforcement of their walls. "Oh," Sarah said, studying the display with interest. "Well, humans are pretty good at adapting to toxins. You should see what some of our street food vendors get away with." A new alien scientist stepped forward, this one resembling a crystalline spider with too many legs. "Ambassador, perhaps you could explain more about these street food vendors. Are they some kind of biological weapons researchers?" Sarah laughed, causing several pieces of sensitive equipment to reset their baseline readings. "No, they're just people selling food from carts. Sometimes the health inspections are a bit flexible." The spider-like scientist began taking furious notes. "And humans consume this potentially contaminated sustenance willingly." "Sure. Best tacos in Mexico City come from a cart that definitely wouldn't pass any galactic safety standards. But man, the flavor is worth the risk." The entire scientific team huddled together, discussing this new information in hurried whispers. Sarah caught phrases like deliberate toxin exposure and evolutionary pressure through culinary Russian roulette. Director Venra finally turned back to her, patterns shifting in what might have been academic excitement. "Ambassador, we need to understand more about Earth's environmental conditions. Our databases classify it as a death world, but clearly our understanding is incomplete." Sarah shrugged. "What do you want to know?" "Your atmospheric composition includes corrosive gases." "Oh, do you mean oxygen?" "Yeah, we need that to breathe." "You experience regular geological upheavals?" "Earthquakes?" "Sure. Got apps to warn us about those." "Extreme temperature variations?" "Wait until I tell you about Minnesota in winter." Each casual answer seemed to send the scientific team into further disarray. Dr. Zilks was practically typing with all their tentacles at once, trying to keep up with the implications. "And these conditions," the spider scientist interjected, "they led to humans developing resistance to molecular restructuring agents." Sarah considered this. "Honestly, I think it's more that we just got used to dealing with whatever the universe throws at us. Earth isn't trying to kill us. Most of the time. We just learned to roll with the punches." "Roll with the punches." The universal translator seemed to struggle with the idiom. "You know, adapt, overcome. If something doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, that kind of thing." The scientist stared at her in horror. "You engage in activities that could potentially kill you to become stronger." "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds crazy," Sarah admitted. "But look at it this way. Humans climb mountains because they're there, eat spicy food because it's fun, and sometimes drink things that technically qualify as poison just to relax after work." Director Venra's patterns turned a shade that suggested either deep thought or mild nausea. "Ambassador, I believe we may need to completely revise our understanding of species classification. Your casual relationship with potentially fatal substances suggests a level of biological resilience that our current models cannot explain." Sarah noticed one of the younger scientists attempting to take a sample of her hair using a robot arm. She reached up and simply plucked a strand herself, handing it over. The scientist nearly fainted. "Look," she said, trying to be diplomatic, "I get that this is all very exciting from a scientific perspective. But is there any chance we could continue this over lunch? I'm starving, and all this talk about street food made me crave tacos." The room erupted in fresh panic as the scientists realized they had no protocols for feeding a human. The spider scientist began calculating the molecular composition of Earth-based tacos, while Dr. Zilks worried about the structural integrity of their dining facilities. Director Venra raised all their geometric appendages for attention. Perhaps we could observe the ambassador's digestive processes in a controlled environment. For science. Sarah stood up, straightening her blazer. "Tell you what, I'll eat whatever you want to serve me, and you can run all the scans you need. But first, we need to talk about updating your classification of Earth. Clearly, your data is a bit outdated." As the scientists scrambled to prepare for this new phase of observation, Sarah couldn't help but smile. She'd come to the academy expecting to discuss cultural exchange and scientific cooperation. Instead, she was about to teach the galaxy's brightest minds that sometimes the best way to handle the impossible was to simply digest it and move on. The Academy's main cafeteria had been evacuated of all other species, transformed into what looked more like a military testing ground than a dining area. Sarah sat at a specially reinforced table, surrounded by monitoring equipment and nervous scientists. "So, this is what you consider food." Sarah stared at the perfectly geometric nutrient cube placed before her. It glowed with a faint blue light and hovered slightly above the plate. Director Venra's patterns shifted proudly. "This is our most advanced sustainment formula. Perfectly balanced, completely sterile, and calibrated to provide optimal nutrition with zero risk of contamination." Sarah poked it with her fork. The cube dodged. "It's moving." "Of course." Dr. Zilks explained enthusiastically. "The nanites ensure proper nutrient distribution and prevent harmful bacterial growth." Sarah pulled out her phone, causing several alarm sensors to activate. "Mind if I show you something?" She pulled up pictures from her last visit to a night market in Bangkok. "This is what we call street food on Earth." The scientists crowded around, their horror growing with each swipe. "Those substances are being prepared in the open air." The spider scientist's crystals clouded with distress. "Is that organic matter being deliberately burned?" Dr. Zilks's tentacles curled in shock. "Are those humans actually touching the food with their appendages?" Director Venra's patterns became jagged with concern. Sarah grinned. "Wait until you see what we do with something called hot pot." She swiped to another photo. "The white or cooking at the table." The collective gasp nearly shorted out the monitoring equipment. "Ambassador," Director Venra said carefully, "are you suggesting that humans regularly prepare and consume food in such hazardous conditions?" "Hazardous? That's gourmet dining where I come from." Sarah pushed away the hovering nutrient cube. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but I don't think your nanites and my immune system are going to get along. How about I show you how humans really eat?" What followed was perhaps the most controversial cooking demonstration in galactic history. After some negotiation, Sarah was granted access to basic cooking equipment, though the scientists insisted on maintaining a level 3 containment field around the preparation zone. "First, you need heat," Sarah explained, firing up a portable stove she brought from Earth. Several scientists backed away nervously. "You're creating plasma?" Dr. Zilks asked, monitoring the flame with growing concern. "It's just fire," Sarah said, placing a pan on the flame. "Humans have been cooking with it for thousands of years." She pulled out ingredients from her diplomatic bag, another source of scientific concern, as the preserved foods violated at least 37 safety protocols. "This is called stir-frying," Sarah explained as she began cooking. "It's quick, simple, and actually helps kill any harmful bacteria." The scientists watched in fascinated horror as she casually handled raw ingredients, mixed substances without precise measurements, and worst of all, tasted the food to check seasoning. Ambassador, the spider scientist's voice rose several octaves. Did you just introduce a potentially contaminated substance directly into your oral cavity? It's called seasoning to taste, Sarah explained patiently. You can't cook properly without tasting as you go. The resulting dish, a simple vegetable stir-fry with earth-sourced seasonings, sent the Academy's sensors into overdrive. The analysis revealed compounds that violated safety regulations in 12 different star systems. Would anyone like to try it? Sarah offered, knowing full well what the response would be. The scientists backed away, but their instruments told an interesting story. The cooking process had actually neutralized many harmful compounds while creating new beneficial ones. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and thoroughly human. Fascinating. Director Venra mused, pattern swirling in deep thought. Your species has developed cooking methods that turn potentially dangerous substances into sustainable nutrition through controlled application of plasma. I mean fire. We call it cuisine. Sarah said, enjoying her meal. Every culture on Earth has their own way of doing it. Some dishes take days to prepare. Others are made in minutes. Some are so spicy they make you cry. Others so subtle you barely notice the flavor. But the risk, Dr. Zilks began, is part of the experience. Sarah finished. Humans don't just survive risks. We transform them into something better. That's what we do with everything. Food, environment, even your harmonious synthesis. We take what could hurt us and make it work for us instead. The implications of this statement sent ripples through the scientific community. If humans could casually transform deadly substances into sustenance, what else were they capable of? As Sarah finished her meal, she noticed the scientists had begun a heated debate about rewriting safety protocols. Some argued for studying human methods of risk adaptation, while others wanted to classify all Earth cooking methods as potential biohazards. I think, Director Venra said finally, we may need to reconsider our entire approach to biological adaptation. Ambassador, would you be willing to share more of your species' cooking techniques? Sarah smiled. I thought you'd never ask. But first, let me tell you about something we call fermentation. It's what happens when we let food go bad on purpose. The resulting chaos would change galactic cuisine forever. The emergency session of the Galactic Scientific Council was called 3 days after what was now being called the culinary incident. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the Academy's Grand Chamber, their protective gear creating a sea of bubbles, shields, and containment suits. Sarah sat calmly in the center, feeling rather like a specimen under a microscope. Above her, the council members debated the implications of her existence with increasing alarm. The human immune system doesn't just resist toxins, Dr. Zilks was explaining, tentacles gesturing at complex holographic models. It actively adapts to them. They have cellular structures that remember harmful substances and become stronger in response. Preposterous. Bella, the crystalline being from the Rigel sector. No species could evolve such capabilities naturally. Sarah cleared her throat. Actually, we call it vaccination. We deliberately expose ourselves to weakened pathogens to build immunity. The chamber fell silent, then erupted in chaos. They intentionally infect themselves with diseases. For protection. Willingly. How are they not extinct? Director Venra's patterns formed soothing geometrical shapes, calling for order. Esteemed colleagues, we must consider the implications. The human approach to biological threats challenges everything we thought we knew about survival. A new figure floated forward, a cloud of intelligent gas contained within a complex electromagnetic field. I have a theory, it pulsed, about Earth and its inhabitants. What if Deathworlds don't just create survivors? What if they create evolvers? The council chamber hummed with nervous energy as the gas being continued. Look at the evidence. Humans don't just endure their hostile environment. They adapt to it, transform it, even derive pleasure from engaging with it. They've turned their planet's deadly conditions into advantages. Sarah watched with interest as a new hologram appeared. A map of Earth with all its deadly features highlighted. Tectonic activity, atmospheric composition, temperature variations, dangerous wildlife, and more. Their planet should be uninhabitable, the gas being continued. Instead, they've thrived. They build cities on fault lines, create food from poison, and treat deadly pathogens as training tools for their immune systems. This isn't just survival, it's accelerated evolution. The chamber erupted in scientific debate. Some council members argued that humans must be artificially enhanced. Others suggested Earth itself might be an ancient experimental laboratory. A few wondered if humans were some kind of biological superweapon. Sarah stood up. Permission to offer a human perspective. The chamber fell silent again. Director Venra's patterns formed an encouraging gesture. "You're all thinking about this backwards," she said. "You see Earth as a death world because you're measuring it against your standards of safety. But to us, it's not about surviving danger. It's about learning to dance with it." She pulled up her own holographic display, showing scenes from Earth. Surfers riding massive waves, climbers scaling impossible peaks, chefs working with open flames, scientists handling dangerous materials. We don't just survive these challenges, we seek them out. Every time we overcome something that could harm us, we don't just get stronger, we get smarter, more adaptable, more innovative. The spider scientist's crystals gleamed with sudden understanding. It's not just biological evolution, it's cultural evolution. You pass these adaptations down through learning. Exactly, Sarah smiled. Every time someone catches a wave, climbs a mountain, or creates a new recipe, they're building on thousands of years of human experience. We're not just surviving our death world, we're constantly finding new ways to thrive in it. The implication sent shockwaves through the council. If humans had developed this approach naturally, what did it mean for galactic civilization's careful, controlled approach to progress? "There's more," Dr. Zilks added nervously. "Our latest analysis shows that human adaptability isn't limited to biological threats. They apply the same principle to technology, society, even psychology. They actively seek out challenges to overcome them." "Is this true, Ambassador?" Director Venra asked, patterns showing intense curiosity. Sarah thought about human history, about breaking the sound barrier, exploring the ocean depths, reaching for the stars. We have a saying on Earth, necessity is the mother of invention. When something seems impossible, that's usually when humans get really interested in doing it. The council chamber buzzed with discussion. Some members saw the potential benefits of this approach to evolution and adaptation. Others worried about the implications of a species that treated deadly challenges as opportunities for growth. Perhaps, the gas being pulsed thoughtfully, we need to revise our understanding of species classification entirely. Instead of measuring environments by their danger level, we should measure species by their adaptability index. Sarah couldn't help but grin. "Just wait until I tell you about how we domesticated wolves by making friends with them." The resulting uproar suggested that the galaxy wasn't quite ready for the full story of human innovation. But as she watched the council struggle with these revelations, Sarah realized something important. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't just their ability to survive danger, but their capacity to transform it into opportunity. The theory of terror, as it was later called, would reshape galactic understanding of evolution, adaptation, and the very nature of survival itself. And it all started with a simple drink that should have been fatal. 6 months after Sarah's initial visit to the Academy, the galactic scientific community was undergoing its own evolution. The pristine halls that once echoed with cautious footsteps now buzzed with a new kind of energy. And at the center of it all was the newly established Department of Human Adaptive Studies. "I still can't believe you approved this," Sarah said, watching a group of alien scientists cautiously approach a simple Earth coffee machine. They were wearing significantly less protective gear than before. Progress, of sorts. Director Venra's patterns formed what Sarah had learned to recognize as a smile. After your revelations, we had no choice but to adapt, rather like humans do. The changes were remarkable. The Academy had begun incorporating human perspectives on risk and adaptation into their research. Some alien species had even started carefully experimenting with controlled exposure to mild environmental stressors, though nothing quite as extreme as Earth's conditions. Ambassador, Dr. Zilks called out excitedly, their tentacles now only partially contained in a protective sleeve. You must see our latest findings on human cellular regeneration. We've identified 17 unique mechanisms that violate conventional biological laws. Sarah followed the excited scientist to a lab where the walls were covered in diagrams of human biology. What had once been seen as terrifying anomalies were now being studied as potential evolutionary advantages. We've begun testing modified versions of your vaccination principle, the spider scientist announced, crystal segments glowing with enthusiasm. The results are promising, though we're proceeding much more cautiously than humans would. Baby steps, Sarah nodded approvingly. Though on Earth, we actually let babies fall down sometimes. It helps them learn to walk. Several nearby scientists dropped their instruments in shock. Some things were still hard for them to process. The most fascinating aspect, Director Venra continued, leading them to a central display, is how this understanding is changing our approach to galactic colonization. We've identified several previously uninhabitable worlds that might be suitable for settlement, using human adaptive principles. The display showed various harsh planets, each with conditions that would have been automatically dismissed before. Now they were being evaluated as potential opportunities for controlled adaptation. Of course, the gas-being scientist pulsed from nearby. No species is expected to match human levels of adaptability. But we're learning that some controlled exposure to environmental challenges can strengthen rather than harm. Sarah watched as a group of younger aliens participated in what they called moderate risk training, essentially handling objects without protective gloves. Their nervous excitement reminded her of children learning to ride a bicycle. There is one concern. Director Venra's patterns shifted to a more serious configuration. Some members of the galactic community are worried about humanity's potential. They fear that a species capable of treating lethal conditions as mere inconveniences might be too dangerous to integrate fully into galactic society. Sarah understood the concern. A species that could drink deadly toxins for fun and deliberately expose themselves to pathogens for protection must seem rather alarming. That's why we need this. She gestured around at the department. Understanding breeds acceptance. Humans aren't invincible or fearless. We've just learned that growth often requires stepping out of our comfort zones. Speaking of comfort zones, Dr. Zilks interrupted. We're ready to begin the first official galactic trial of human cooking methods. Would you do the honors, Ambassador? The specially designed kitchen lab had become Sarah's favorite place in the Academy. Here, under carefully controlled conditions, she taught alien scientists the basics of Earth cuisine. Today's lesson: making bread. Now, the fascinating thing about bread, Sarah explained to her nervous audience, is that it's actually a controlled rot. We take grain, grind it up, add microorganisms. The horrified guests had grown noticeably milder over the months. Some of the braver scientists had even started sampling the results, though always with extensive medical monitoring. As she guided them through the process, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. The galaxy was learning that perhaps their careful, protective approach to existence had limited their potential. Humans, with their seemingly reckless embrace of challenge, had opened their eyes to new possibilities. The universe is inherently dangerous, she told her audience as the bread baked. But danger doesn't have to mean destruction. Sometimes, like this dough, you have to let things get a little messy to create something wonderful. The smell of fresh bread filled the lab, and Sarah noticed even the most cautious scientists leaning in with interest. One small step for alien kind, one giant leap for galactic cuisine. Later, as she prepared to return to Earth for a brief visit, Director Venray approached her one last time. Ambassador, their patterns formed complex, emotional geometries. You've taught us that evolution isn't just about surviving challenges. It's about embracing them as opportunities for growth. Perhaps humans aren't Deathworlders after all. Perhaps you're life worlds, teaching the rest of us how to truly live. Sarah smiled, packing her bag, which now included several specially preserved samples of alien food, properly sterilized, of course. Some habits die hard. Just remember, she said, the next time something seems impossibly dangerous, ask yourself, what would a human do? She paused, considering the chaos that advice might cause. On second thought, maybe ask, what would a responsible human do? We don't want to start an interstellar incident. As her ship prepared for departure, Sarah looked back at the Academy. What had started with a simple drink had evolved into something far more significant. A revolution in how the galaxy understood life, growth, and adaptation. And somewhere in the facility, a brave alien scientist was probably taking their first bite of unsterilized bread, wondering if this was how humans felt all the time, just a little bit nervous, but mostly excited about what might happen next. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, Sarah thought, was exactly how evolution was supposed to work. End of story.